What's up, fam? Welcome back to the Steep Stuff Podcast. I'm your host, James Lariello, and I'm so excited to bring you guys an episode today with none other than Mr. Remi Leroux. You guys might recognize that name because Remy just took third place on the podium of the Big Alta 50K this past Saturday against the likes of Eli Hemming and some of the biggest names in the sport. Crazy kind of sub-ultra / ultra early season race that took place this past weekend, the Big Alta. I can't believe how competitive it absolutely was. That 50K men's field was insane. Guys, I'm so excited to have had Remy on. We talk about all kinds of things, including his upcoming season, where he's getting ready and gearing up for Sunapee Scramble, as well as the Broken Arrow, Ascent, and Vertical Kilometer. Remy has a whole slew of crazy accomplishments under his names. Second place last year for both for the up, down, and the vertical at the Canadian National Championship, which pretty much qualifies him to go compete at Worlds this upcoming year. He's also taking top 10 finishes, both the Broken Arrow and the 23K, as well as the Golden Trail Series race, the Mammoth Trail Fest last year. Really interesting guy. I love his training methodology. I just love how dialed he is, like as far as like getting ready for these races, as well as just his training and the way he approaches the sport. Also, he's got really a cool background coming from tennis. He was a very competitive tennis player and just like has this meteoric rise to be one of the most talented upcoming athletes in the sport. And did I mention he just signed a professional contract with Brooks? So excited to see him on that team as Brooks has really been investing heavily in sub-ultra. So without further ado, I'll stop rambling and let you guys listen to this episode. It's a personal favorite of mine. Can't wait to share a start line with Remy soon and get to talk to him more. Hope you guys enjoy this one.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live.
People, Earth, listen up. It is March, guys, and I am so excited that Ultimate Direction is finally unveiling their new vest lineup for 2025. Head on over to ultimatedirection.com to check out the new Race Vest 6-liter and Ultra Vest 12-liter. They're going to be coming at you in two beautiful aesthetic colors, the onyx and green, as well as the white and blue. Guys, I absolutely love these. I've been playing around in these products for months and months now. You might have seen Tara Warren last year running in both the Ultra and Race Vest as she absolutely smashed it in the Rocky Mountain Slam. Guys, this is a very durable, solid product that I absolutely love. Like I said, the color wheels are beautiful, and this is something I think you're going to be really looking at as you start to put together your race calendars. You're going to need some dependable gear for 2025. So this is definitely something to turn your head toward. Hop on ultimatedirection.com right now. Use code SteepStuffPod for 25% off your cart. Again, like I said, use code SteepStuffPod. Treat yourself to one of these. I think you guys are going to love them. I'd love to hear your feedback. Let me know what you think. Enjoy. Remi Leroux, welcome to the Steep Stuff Podcast. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Dude, I'm awesome. I'm so excited to finally sit down and have a chat with you. I've been a big fan of yours for a couple of years now. So, we cover the sub-ultra scene. You're very much in the sub-ultra scene. So this is a match made in heaven to finally have a conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. I remember the one with Joe specifically, which I really enjoyed. I mean, Joe is a big inspiration for me, and I've had the opportunity of racing him a couple of times, and yeah, hearing him on the podcast with you was pretty great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, Joe's the GOAT, man. It's kind of crazy to see like how much he's done over the last few, actually over his entire career. It's kind of wild being in his 40s and still making teams. So, it's crazy. Dude, more on to you. How's your day going so far?
Doing pretty good. You know, I'm here, I'm living in basically Quebec, Canada, where our winters are pretty brutal and it kind of depends from one winter to the other. Like last year was actually pretty decent, but this year specifically has been really hard. Like just like snow all the time, a lot of ice on the roads, a lot of wind. So yeah, so today I was able to get a run in, but like pretty much like was slipping like all the time with kind of like a lot of ice on the dirt roads here. But yeah, I mean, good day of training. Then went on to a spin on Zwift afterwards, and that's pretty much it for the day so far.
Oh, nice, man. I love those days where you can kind of get your perfect double in, you know, get on the bike, get your run in and be able to get those things done. It's, I don't know, it's like checking it off the box, right? It's kind of fun. Dude, for winter, like, is it like Vermont where you are? I know you're actually not too far from Vermont, New Hampshire. Do you just have like endless dirt roads to train on?
Yes, actually, I'm really close to Vermont. I'd say maybe 40-minute drive, and I'm right at the border. So where I am specifically in Quebec, it's very much like Vermont in the sense that we have a ton of dirt roads, and that's pretty much basically why I live here in Quebec in this part. It's called like the Eastern Townships. And yeah, we basically have like an infinity of dirt roads where we can train. And for me, it's one of my great like pleasures of running. It's just like exploring all the countryside here. And I think it's actually great running for it's great preparation for like the trail running season, just because during the winter time we can't really run trails so much just because there's like so much snow and so much ice. But on the dirt roads, since like they plow the roads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They plow the roads. So basically you can run there. The surface isn't too bad, but you have like a ton of hills. So when you think about it, I see it. It's kind of like if you're running trails, but like non-technical trails with good hills. So it's kind of like actually pretty good for training for the trail running season, I'd say.
Yeah, dude, the dirt roads are amazing. Like we don't have a ton out here, but we like I'd say Boulder in that area probably has a lot more.
Mhm.
But yeah, when you can get on to train on like steep dirt roads, it builds strength. Obviously, it builds a phenomenal running economy because your steps are in place, like your cadence is solid. So yeah, I feel like from a training perspective, like you can get super fit off of just miles and miles of rolling dirt roads.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like a cool feeling because a lot of the time you kind of in some places where you think like, okay, like there's probably very few people that have ever come like at this road except from like the people that live there. So it's kind of like a cool like sort of I don't know, like I don't want to say like redneck feeling, I guess, but just like a feeling of, well, like
Blue
I'm out here in
collar,
the
blue collar.
middle. Yeah, blue collar, exactly. That's what I was working for. Yeah, kind of like a blue collar feeling of being out there, like in the sticks of like the countryside and just training there. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
I know you and Dan Kurtz are competitors. I know you guys have raced each other a bunch over the last few years and now teammates, which is pretty dope. We'll get to that. But do you ever venture down to like train with the Northwoods guys like him and Ben True, Eric Lapuma? I know that's not,
Man,
not too far away.
it's kind of like not too far away, but they're kind of like maybe an hour and a half south of the border. So
Okay.
so for us to link up would take like one of us would have to do like a 3 hour drive, which
So
is
it's far.
not so much, but it's still like kind of significant. But like we've messaged each other so many times of like, oh man, we gotta link up, we gotta do some trainings together, but it never actually happened. But I think yeah, we have very similar terrains to run on, and I've made the trip a lot to the Northeast to do a couple races there where I've raced Dan, and last fall Dan made the trip to the Canadian Mountain Running Championships in Quebec. So yeah, that's been really cool, and hopefully this year we'll find a moment to get some training in together because I mean yeah, those guys are super cool, Eric and Dan, and I would love to do some training with them for sure.
Yeah, it's cool that there's like a solid contingent that's continuing to grow. Like, dude, I think the this past off season, once they announced the Cirque Series races that were going to be in the Northeast, I started doing like a deep dive into like, okay, what can I like couple my schedule with? Like, because I have family in the Northeast, so I was like, what can I couple my schedule with and maybe stay a little longer out there and race a bunch of stuff? And I was like, kind of pleasantly surprised on like the Northeast scene is legit. Like, there's a lot of good like solid like mountain races out there that like people don't really talk about.
Totally. And I think looking at 2025, it's going to be very exciting, specifically for the month of June. Because, like you say, for example, someone who would want to spend like 1 month in the Northeast to race, in the month of June, you basically have something every weekend. Because the first weekend, you have Sunday P Scramble, which is the US champs for the up down. Then the week after that, you have Cirque Series at Cannon Mountain. The week after that, you have Mount Washington Road Race. And then the week after that, I think you have Cirque Series Killington. So it's really nice. And I think something I really appreciate about like those Northeast races is that they're very focused on like the historic side of the races. Like it's races where, like, for example, Mount Washington Road Race or Loon Mountain Race, like it's races where the course has stayed like the exact same 1 year to the other. And they put a lot of like emphasis on like the history of it, of all the different times and all the runners that have been there. And it's kind of like this very simple, it's a very simple organization, but it's just so, I don't know, I find it kind of very cool when like the organizations like put emphasis on like the history of it. And yeah, it's just like classic mountain running, really.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, I would even venture, like, just by like the proximity and the amount of sub ultra races in the Northeast, I would venture to even say it's like like almost like the Mecca. And the only reason I'll say it is because, like, yeah, like we've Broken Arrows in the West. There's a bunch of like races at like different ski resorts in throughout the Mountain West, like the Cirque Series and stuff like that. And you have the Rut. But outside of that, like for me in Colorado, like, dude, we don't really have like any solid, other than like Kendall Mountain and the A Basin race at Cirque. Like we have like no really good sub ultra races. I mean, Pikes, you could argue for that, but there's just like not the amount that you would have in the Northeast where you could do it like literally back to back to back, like every weekend, and like have something to do, which is crazy. So yeah, it's kind of cool. I don't know. Like I was looking at, have you ever raced is it the Cranmore Mountain Race? I was just looking at that for November.
I've never ran that one, but I know Dan has ran it in the past, and yeah, it looks really cool. It's just like the timing of it is kind of complicated because it's like beginning of October, and that's like where all like so many other races take place at the same time. But yeah, that looks like another legit race that I want to do. It's like a up down on like ski slopes, so you can go super fast. And I mean, that's another part what I like about like these Northeast mountain races, which is kind of ironic in a sense because like a lot of like the Northeast trails are super technical with like so many rocks and routes. But the mountain races themselves are usually not super technical because they want you to do like to actually like run fast basically. And me, I really like that, I'd say. And yeah, I think Cranmore is like a perfect example of that, where you go up like some ski slopes, which is for sure like super steep but not technical, and you can just like bomb down like some fire roads or some ski slopes again. Yeah,
it's crazy, man. So much good stuff out there. All right, let's pivot to, I definitely want to get into a little bit of your background. If you wouldn't mind, just give like a little breakdown. I think your relationship of how you got into running is really interesting, and like talk about your background with tennis as well.
Yeah. Basically, I'm surprised you know that, but yeah, I used to play tennis growing up, basically until the age of 19, basically. And from there, I kind of was at a crossroad where I had the choice of either studying in the US with a scholarship to pursue tennis or stay in Quebec. And if I would stay in Quebec, which I eventually had to take the decision to do, I kind of was forced to quit tennis just because if you want to pursue tennis like at a higher level, you're kind of obligated to have like a coach, like a strength coach. You need to have some very good like training partners. You need to have access to all these different installations. And at some point, it's just like, it's very expensive. So if you're not like supported by a bigger program, like in a US college, then it's very difficult to pursue on your own. So basically, since that wasn't possible for me, I decided to stay in Quebec and basically quit tennis. And after a couple months of not really doing that sport anymore, I was kind of like, what do people do with all this time and like this energy? Like, what do people do normally? So it kind of like was kind of very instinctive, where one day I was just like, well, you know what? I'll just like go out and just go for a run. And I really fell in love with it pretty much immediately just because of the independence of it, because I kind of was really tired of all those stuff about tennis, in the sense that even though I was really motivated, just because like I didn't have access to all these different resources, like I couldn't level up like in the sport. Whereas I felt like with running, which was what was really refreshing, was that you're in complete control of what you can do, basically. Like you don't really need any installation. You only need like a pair of running shoes, and you can just go on your own and train as much as you can, basically. And I think it's nice when I look at it in hindsight that I didn't really have like any friends that were running, or I didn't have any coach at that time. I never didn't really know anyone that was running, but it was just purely like I was running simply because I loved it. And I think that's really nice that it started that way. It kind of shows that I did it for like the good reasons, I guess. Like I wasn't forced by someone else to do it. And yeah, basically really like pretty much was hooked on running since the beginning. And I think very typically started doing a lot of like road running at the start. And looking back on how I trained during those times, it was very ridiculous how I would run, because I think today in running, a lot of people have access to, it's like so easy to have information about running, like on the internet. But even though it's not so far ago, but like in 2017, even like if YouTube and everything was a thing, like a lot less people were talking about like the training of running. And since I didn't know anyone personally who was running, I kind of had to do those researches by myself. And it was very limited what you can find. And yeah, at that time I was running way too much for my level at the time. And my idea was like, okay, I want to do a marathon. And every time I go run, I'm kind of near the 4 minutes per kilometer pace, which is like 6:10 per mile. So my idea was like, okay, if I want to run a marathon at 4 minutes per kilometer pace, every time I'm going to go run, I'm going to try to run at 4 minutes per kilometer pace, which was like super dumb. But if I go around like 3 kilometers or 20 kilometers, I'd always try to like hit that pace, because in my mind, it was like, this is the pace I have to get used to. And yeah, it actually almost worked. I think I ran like 2:51 for my first marathon. And I
It's
think
pretty solid.
2:48 is like 4 minute pace. Um, so yeah, so basically did a couple of road races to start, and just slowly learned a bit more like how to train, just like talking to people and like making friends into the sport. And then at some point after another marathon where I ran like 2:43, I was like, okay, I'm kind of ready to try something else. I feel like doing another block of like running on the roads would be kind of long. So I discovered trail running at that time. And yeah, I think what I regret, I'd say, about that period is that in my mind, it was kind of like, okay, I've done marathons. Now, like, what's the next thing to do? Like, what's my next objective? Well, it has to be longer than marathons. So at that time, I was like, okay, I've done 42K. Now let's do 50K. Then when I did my first 50Ks, I was like, oh, well, let's try 50 miles. So in my mind, it was always like, every time I'd finish a race, it's kind of like my idea was like, oh, well, if I want to have another goal, I just have to go like upper in distance. Whereas I realize now that that's not really the way to go. Like your goal, I mean, now I feel much more satisfaction in I'll try the same distance, but my next goal is just to get faster at it. And I much more appreciate that. So yeah, so basically for a couple of years, did a lot of like 50Ks to 50 miles. And I think those years were really fun in terms of training, because, I just like ran a lot like in the woods and just exploring so many trails here in Quebec, which, I mean, yeah, we don't have like super high peaks like in Colorado, but we have a lot of nice trails to explore. So had a lot of fun with that. And but yeah, but I think in terms of racing, in hindsight, I didn't have so much fun racing like the 50K to 50-mile distances. And so yeah, so then like fast forward a couple years back in 2023, I think, or 2022, I ran Loon Mountain Race, which was like my first sub ultra, like sort of legit mountain race. And that was like an eye opener for me. It was like, oh my God, like first of all, it kind of showed me that like, oh, well, I'm actually pretty good at this shorter stuff. But I think even more importantly, it showed me that I really enjoyed that distance, like just like the racing aspect of it, of being like, you're starting the race and it's not like, oh, I should pace myself. I have to be careful to go like, to not go too fast, like in an ultra. I feel like for a race like Loon Mountain, you can just go all out from the start. And that's something that's very cool. And the fact that you're always like competing against all other runners during the race is very exciting as well. And yeah, from that point on, I've been basically focusing on sub ultra for the past 3 years, and yeah, it's been really cool.
Dude, I love your story, man. And it's so interesting to me, especially like not coming from the traditional track and field background, but more so tennis. The thing about sub ultra, and I think Joe describes it maybe one of the best ways. He's like, there's a lot that goes into making a sub ultra athlete, and a good component of it is genetic predetermination. Like, how far will your genetics take you? Because some people are good at it and some people are just not. And there's a little bit of wiggle room to work your ass off and get better and improve. But I just find it so interesting that you'll come across folks like you that like didn't really do track and field and came from a non-traditional sport in tennis and like have success at a high level at the sub ultra distance, which is amazing. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like I don't want to believe that genetics play a big part of it. I think I'm a big, I don't know if I actually believe it, but I want to believe that anyone can like work their way to a high level in the sport. But yeah, I should say that even when I was playing tennis, even though tennis, like, yes, it's not only cardio, but cardio does play like a pretty big role in it. And I was still like training quite a lot, like of like endurance. So when I started running, it's not as if like I came from nothing, but yeah, but still I didn't do any track and field when I was growing up, which would have been fun, but yeah,
I would imagine like, and the only reason I say that is like, cause you stand out to me as like one of the best uphill runners in the world, possibly, dude. I mean, like you've had some crazy, results. So I would imagine your VO2 max, I don't know if you've got it measured, but I would imagine it's pretty fucking high.
I never have actually.
No? Okay.
Yeah, but I would be interested to do it. I think, but I think it's very specific to uphill, my ability, because on the flats, like I'm not super great. Like if I do a 5K, like I'm not going to run like super quick, but I think there's something about uphills that it's just like for me, I love it, and it's just perfect for me.
It's funny. I was laughing, and we'll get to your YouTube channel later. But one of the things I was laughing about is I was watching you have this amazing video of David Hedges versus Max King
Yeah.
at I think it was the 2021 or 2022 Breakneck marathon, and I just thought it was funny because you were hanging with them both as they were, racing each other kind of on the flats and the descents, and then all of a sudden they're going uphill, and you are like paces ahead of everybody. And I just thought it was kind of funny. I was like, it makes sense.
Yeah, I was so happy that there were like these few like uphill sections near the end. Like for people who don't know, it's basically like I was waiting I think there was like 2 miles left to the race, and I wanted to film like the last 2 miles of the race. And for the whole race, it was Max King who had like a huge lead. So in my mind, it's like, okay, like Max King is going to come here alone. I'm going to like jog it in with him. Like maybe like we'll have a chat and it'll be interesting for like people who are watching. But then when I saw him and then David like together, I was like, holy damn, like this is going to be super fast for me. And that last 2 miles was mainly downhill and pretty technical, which is pretty much my weakness. So basically, like I cut a lot of moments in the video, but for a lot of moments, like they were gapping me, and for a lot of times, I was like, "Damn, like this is it. Like this kind of sucks. Like I'm not going to be able to film them like till the finish line." But then like there would be like some mini uphill sections, and then I would just like hammer super hard because I knew like, okay, if I want to stay with them till the finish line, like I have to like make moves almost on them, like on the uphills. And yeah, that was so fun. I mean, that was probably like the best filming moment I've had, I guess.
Dude, it was a great video. Your YouTube is incredible. Like I know you haven't put as many videos out in a little while, but like, dude, stick with it. Like I was blown, like I was getting so hyped watching the Sunapee race. I guess someone had filmed the Sunapee race as well, and you have a great video on there of Alex Ricard and yourself, Joe, and like Garrett Corcoran, like just killing each other in the front. It was really fun to follow along. Yeah, your YouTube is awesome, man.
Yeah, I miss that. I think one of the things, maybe less so today, but especially like 4 or 5 years ago, I think one of the things that was really missing in our sport is just like long form raw content of like races. like even today, if you think about like races, like I don't know, like Sierra Zinal or things like that, you don't find any like actual like maybe okay, Golden Trail does like a pretty good job, but I mean, there's a ton of different like very big races that you don't really find so much like content
Yeah.
online of like the races themselves. And that was kind of like my intention of like, well, okay, let's just, it's not that complicated. You just need a GoPro. I don't think people care about the quality being like extremely good. And so basically, yeah, my idea was just like, let's just film a bunch of like raw content of different races. And yeah, I've had the chance to film like yeah, a lot of races in Quebec. I filmed also JFK 50 mile, and yeah, Breakneck Point was another one. And yeah, I really enjoyed those. I've kind of slacked off a bit in the last couple of years just because when I'm racing myself a lot, it makes it a bit more complicated
It's
to
hard. Yeah.
also film other races. But yeah, if I'm ever like injured again, that's something I want to do like for sure.
Yeah. I loved it, man. And like, I think you're so right. Like there is, especially, and this is not to like shit on ultra at all, but like other than the fast ultras, I think sub ultra like has that
Yeah.
eye appeal to it where if
Mhm.
you're in the last 2 miles of a race and you see, you know, two of the best runners in the sport like killing each other to win, especially that sprint finish,
Yeah.
coming down the grassy field or grassy knoll or whatever you want to call it, like it was so exciting. And there's so many like aspects to sub ultra that I think pop out and are a little more exciting to the average viewer as opposed to like, this is not to shit on sub ultra or sub shit on ultra, but like at the end of a 100-mile race, right? Like, yeah, unless it's Western states and it's the front 20 people, like your people are walking generally, right? Or like jogging. So it's not as exciting. So I think there's that eye appeal too, that like, I think you're really onto something with it. The other thing too, that I thought was cool is that you were very transparent in a lot of your workouts. You would post these like workout videos of a lot of these different, you know, like rolling road workouts that you would be doing like on the dirt roads and stuff. And I don't know. I love the transparency because I think as a professional runner, people wonder like, what do we do? Like, how do we get fit? Like people think it's just some, you know, black box there, but like you make it much more transparent for people to kind of see what you're up to and how you're, you know, achieving these great things because, you know, you can see what your workouts are like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone who really enjoys like the science of it. In like, I do lactate tests and all these different things. I look at heart rate a lot, and I think I guess the reason I like to share it so much is just because that's kind of how I learned about it myself. It's just like watching some YouTube videos, and you know, when I started trail running, basically my main resource was like Sage Canada's YouTube videos. So I think it's kind of, I guess, in a way, being kind of like the same way of let's just share what I want. And I think there's also maybe another part of me that's just like in on social media, I find it kind of, I don't want to say awkward, but just like I never know what to share about because it's just like it doesn't feel very genuine sometimes. But that part of it, it's kind of, it feels kind of natural because I feel like there's an actual meaning to it. Like, and it can actually like serve someone who's listening to that message and be like, oh, well, that gives me an idea. Like maybe I'll try that workout like next week or something. Whereas sometimes on social media, if you're just talking about like yourself, it's just like, well, like what's the point of it? You know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
if I see someone on the street, I'm not going to say like, hey man, I just like won this race this weekend or whatever. It's just like, it's kind of awkward. Whereas I feel like showing a bit more about like some training insights, I feel like has a bit more meaning and hopefully like, yeah, it can maybe give some ideas to some people to do themselves.
Dude, I think it's an interesting thing you bring up. Like one of the things I've pondered and I've had a lot of conversations with other folks in the sport lately about is like authenticity, but like authenticity on social media and like Instagram's almost, I think Instagram would probably be the best example because it's a weird place. It's like, okay, do I like obviously brands require folks to in some ways to post, right? And but it's also like weird. It's like, do I post about like, okay, I could post about a race result. That makes sense. Or like my experience at this race. But it's like, what do I post about all the other times? Do I just post about like my training? Like,
Yeah.
what do people think about that? Like, do I think I'm like showing off? I don't want to show off. Like, I
Yeah.
just want to be a normal person. So it does. It's an interesting, like, like situation. I ponder it myself. I'm like, I don't want to come off grandiose or like I'm talking about like or braggy, you know. So it's a weird. Whereas almost like a podcast or a YouTube channel is much more authentic in storytelling. You can really truly be yourself a little bit more as opposed to just sharing the world in photos, which is interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think on social media for myself, I kind of, yeah, I kind of like stick to sharing my races and sharing my training, but kind of like in a way where there's like a bit of like an education sort of side to it. And that's kind of like how I justify myself that it's okay to do that and not like arrogant or
Yeah,
any
yeah.
like any way like that. But yeah, I agree with you. It's social media when you think about it, like a bit too long, it's kind of like, wow, this is so strange that like we do that, you know?
It is really weird.
And but yeah, I guess yeah, for me, I enjoy sharing those stuff, so it's not such a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and I applaud you for it. Like the YouTube is cool, and your blog is neat too. I read a couple of the things you put on there. I thought that was great as well. I love seeing athletes at a high level start to like branch out, and like I'm seeing more people do Substack a lot, and there's been some great writing on Substack lately in trail running. Yeah, it's just interesting seeing people do different things that kind of they can express their voice in the sport a little bit more, if you will, which has been interesting. I want to move on to talk about sponsor. I know you recently just departed Merrill to join the Brooks team. And I thought that was a really exciting signing because I love the investment that Brooks has been putting recently into Sub Ultra. Like, I just think that they have, I guess if we're comparing like ITRA scores, like probably the deepest Sub Ultra and most talented Sub Ultra team in the world right now, just by how many athletes they have. Like, can you share a little bit about that experience and what it's been like so far? I know it's pretty fresh, but.
Yeah. It's been really great. I mean, to be honest, like you just mentioned it, the fact that they have so many sub ultra athletes and that they are very passionate about the sub ultra scene is something that was really appealing to me and really made me want to like be part of the team. Um, like just like in a couple, maybe next month actually, I'll go to Seattle and we have like this training camp with all the North American athletes, and I'm just so excited by that. I think there's a ton of like runners who have been and are still with Brooks today, which I'm already pretty good friends with, which is really exciting. And like you said, they have a lot of new signings, which will be really nice to meet up with them as well. And yeah, I think their sort of vision, I guess, is one with which I identify quite a lot, in the sense that um, they seem they kind of like are professional, I guess, in a way. Like there's they incentivize performance quite a bit, and I don't feel like the pressure to have to do like 1,000 social media posts and stuff like that with them. So that's something with which I identify quite a lot and I really appreciate. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to race and meet up like all my fellow teammates now.
That'll be great, man. I mean, like from a signing perspective, like Taylor Stack, Sydney Peterson, like yourself. I'm trying to think of who else they picked up. Like quite a few new sub ultra, like very specific sub ultra athletes. It was really exciting to see that. And then, like you guys have like Roberto De Lorenzi on the team. Dan Kurtz. Like it's a deep team, dude. Like there's a lot of good, solid Brooks athletes, which is exciting. So
yeah, it's going to be really fun. Yeah, especially like at the Golden Trail races, I feel like we're going to be like a very strong team there. Like,
oh yeah, big time.
especially like all with like the Brooks kit at the start. It's going to be pretty cool. Yeah.
Let's talk Golden Trail. What is your because I know on Ultra Sign Up we'll talk about some of your planned races for this year, but I did not see Broken Arrow on there. Are you gonna be there this year?
I mean, okay, that's kind of like a complicated situation a bit because I'm hoping I'm going to be entered with Golden Trail.
Okay.
Because Golden Trail has like this elite program that they open during the winter. And basically, if I'm accepted in that program, I can basically sign up and have a free bib for whatever Golden Trail race I want. But they haven't responded back. But at the same time, I know a lot of other people and no one has received any answer yet. So I'm starting to get a bit worried about that.
I wouldn't. I mean, dude, your 2024
But
season was insane. Like they have
yeah,
to, yeah, they gotta let you. If not, just reach out to Brandon and just be like, yo, give me a
yeah,
break.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, Broken Arrow is definitely the goal,
Okay.
and there's also like this new race in Mexico the week after that I definitely want to do, and yeah, then after that there's a race in Austria and then Sierra Zanal. So those would be like my four Golden Trail races this year. I think Sierra Zanal is definitely one. It's like the race I really want to do. Last year I was supposed to do it, but I got sick like just before the race. Well, just before, a couple of weeks before. Um, and yeah, this year I just really want to go out there. I think it's such like an iconic race, and in my mind, most likely the most competitive like trail race simply.
On the planet, yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, yeah, I'm just really looking forward to go out there, and yeah, I think it's going to be really exciting.
I think we could dive more deep into series and all, just because I think from someone like yourself, because there's so much climbing early on, like, dude,
Yeah.
you have like an interestingly rare skill set to be able to perform very well at that race. I don't know. You should. I think if I would be, I'm buying stock. Like I'm excited to see you go see it, do it. So it's pretty sweet.
It's such a tricky course, and I'm really gonna have to think about my strategy for it, just because yes, it starts like with a really long climb, but at the end of the climb, you're 3 miles into a 20-mile race. So it's like you can't something like that, maybe a bit more than 3 miles, but it's like wow, like you can't go all out on that climb. And having raced like sub ultra, it's like people go all out at the beginning every time.
Stupid hard.
So even if I have like a really good climb, I mean, I'm probably not going to be near the front. So I'm not going to be like in the front, I guess. So it's going to be very like a long race afterwards. But yeah, I think it's a part of why the race is so iconic is because the course is so special in the sense that you start with the double VK, then you have like very rolling section in the middle, and then at the end, like 1 or 2 miles of like steep downhill. And yeah, I think the preparation for it, especially like given the level of competition, like you actually have to do like some specific workouts for it. Like in the sense that, okay, like I'll do workouts where I'll start with a steep uphill and then I'll do some intervals on the flat or something like that, just to like really prepare your legs for the demands of like the specificity of that horse.
It is, yeah. I don't even know where to begin, like on how to prepare for something like that. Like you need
Yeah.
like a lot of very specific things
Mhm.
from a training perspective. Do you think in some of the time leading up, maybe you'll go out to Europe a little bit early to maybe train on the course or see more of that to like get some of your last specific reps in, or like what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's going to be a bit complicated just because the week before there's the other Golden Trail race in Austria.
Gotcha.
So if I do have the chance to run on the course, it'll probably be like the week of the race. So maybe not so much. But I think one of the things I really like doing is, and I think I'm pretty good at this, is analyzing courses like on Strava and all that different, like all the different ways you can analyze courses. And I think just like analyzing the course, I'll be able to like find some climbs here in Quebec to kind of like simulate the course itself. And yeah, I think that's probably what I'll opt to do instead. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. And I don't want to dial too back into training, but just out of curiosity, like when I know you do a lot of like more flatter rolling road stuff in the winter, like a lot of people do, but like when do you start dialing in more specific trail stuff? Do you just like wait for the snow to melt or do you try to do it
Exactly.
earlier? Is that what it is? Okay.
I mean, if I could, I'd probably do mountain stuff all year long, but just because our winters like are so difficult, it's pretty much impossible, or it's very difficult to do like actual like intensity in trails, basically from December until mid-April, basically. So yeah, basically as soon as like mid-April starts and the snow starts to melt, that's when I get more like into trail specific workouts. But yeah, it's really depending on the conditions, I guess. But I think it's kind of nice because it kind of like when like mid-April comes, I'm really excited for mountain running workouts. I'm kind of like fed up of doing all that flat stuff, and it's kind of like refreshing to have the mix of both. And I do think having some flat speed especially for me who doesn't have like a track and field background, to at least have like a big part of the season dedicated for that is pretty beneficial.
Oh, for sure. 100%. I mean, dude, just from cadence, running economy, there's so many things that will go into
Yeah.
just continuing to make you a better, well-rounded athlete in
Yeah.
general. So,
Yeah. And I mean, like these races now, like Golden Trail races, like at Mammoth Trail Fest, even though like most of the races are in like trails and you're going steep uphill, like even like the first 2 miles, which was like on the road, I mean, you have to be able to run at like 5 minute pace comfortably to be like in the top 25 at those races.
so
So if
crazy.
you have like no like flat speed, you're just like gonna start like outside the top 50, and it's like must be so discouraging to start a race like so far back if you have like the intention of like finishing near the top. So just for like these small sections of like flat of like flat terrain during these races, I think you kind of need to have that, yeah, that background of speed of it.
Yeah, you got to have the turnover. Let me ask you this also from not just from a training perspective, but I do want to double back a little bit to Broken Arrow. Like last year you doubled in the VK and it was the 23K, correct? And you
Yeah.
had great races at both. What do you think you learned to be able to take away from last year to bring into this year that you think you can improve upon? I'm just so curious because that's such a competitive, especially this year with
Yeah.
Golden Trail. It's going to be wild.
I'd say for the VK especially is to not get influenced by what the other runners are doing. Because when I look back at my own race, I felt like I started way too fast. And that kind of, I don't want to say ruined, but it affected me negatively, like in the second part of the race. Or like, yeah, like in the second part of the race. I was kind of like fading because of like my very fast start. But even though I felt like I started way too fast, I was probably like 25th after the first like 1 mile.
That's crazy.
So I think it's because I was like so influenced by the other runners that I'm like, oh my God, like how are so many runners in front of me? I have to catch up. I have to catch up. But even though I was fading in like the second half, I was still catching so many runners. So I think for this year, I'll be a bit more smart at the beginning and just really focus in on my own perception of my effort. And even if that is like, I think actually Mika Baudouin Rousseau, who finished third, he did like a perfect race because I think he was even like behind me after the first mile. He really did his own effort. And yeah, he finished third at that race. So I think this year I'll definitely just like, yeah, focus in on my own effort. And if I'm 50th at the beginning, then that's fine. And I just have to be confident enough that I'll be able to reel everyone in like in that second half.
That's amazing. And I think you have the unique ability to be able to do it. Like your uphill speed is so solid. I mean, dude, last year to come away, what were you, sixth place or something like that in the VK?
Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing. That's such a crazy result to think like, I mean, you're talking Patrick Kippenjango. I think did you roll up Philemon? I think you got him.
At the very end, I was so happy about that. I raced like Philemon and Patrick so many times because I did a lot of like World Cup stuff in the last couple of years. And yeah, I think that's the only thing. That's the only time I beat Philemon, I think. But yeah.
Dude, oh my, all right. So I didn't want to pivot too hard, but I find it very interesting because you are the only person that I've had on the podcast that's beat David Sinclair in 1 year twice, which is so crazy to think of. You got him twice. I'm trying to remember because I was just looking at the stats before we had this podcast. You got him at the Canadian Mountain Running Champs. And then you got him another time. I can't remember what race it was though, but you did get him
I think
twice.
he was at Broken Arrow Vertical.
That's right. That's what it was.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is crazy because like David Sinclair's he's like God level, which is kind of wild to think about.
I think it kind of shows the beauty of our sport of like every race is so unique. Like if I would have ran JFK, David would have destroyed me like for like maybe a couple hours. But since every course is so different, it just allows for different athletes to sort of excel at these very like niche differences of our sport. And I think that's what makes like trail running in general so cool. Because if you compare it to, for example, like road running, if X runner, if like Kipchoge is running against, I don't know, like another road runner, like even if the course changes like a bit, 99% of the time, if this runner like has a faster PB than the other runner, like that first runner is probably going to win. Whereas in trail running, if a race is technical, if a race is more longer, it's, you know, all these different parameters are in play. It just allows for different results every time. And as a spectator, I think that's really exciting.
It is. I think it creates, like, it's a very difficult thing then to become dominant, right? It's like you can only be dominant in the races that like fit your skills the best. That's why I found Joe to be such an anomaly, dude. Because like Joe has been, him and Andy. I mean, Andy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Joe's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, to ever do it. And it's like these guys have smashed it for years and years and years, and on all kinds of courses too, which is crazy to think when you have like you in the mix, Christian Allen, El Hussein, all kinds of folks coming into the sport now, which is crazy. So yeah, it's I'd say the most exciting time in our sport like ever, you know, with all the new talent coming in.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it's also nice to see a bit more media coverage. Like I really love this sport as a runner, but I also really love this sport as a spectator, like as a fan of the sport. And now it's very cool to see like a lot of these races with like who invest a lot in media coverage, and just like you know, like some podcasts where they do previews of the races themselves and then they do breakdowns of the races afterwards. I think as a spectator of the sport, it just makes things so much more enjoyable and so much more exciting to like follow the races themselves. And yeah, I agree with you. It's a very exciting spot. It's a very exciting time to follow this sport. And I feel like we just see so many more like road runners or track runners making the switch to sub ultra running. And that's just going to elevate the level so much. And yeah, it's going to make things so great.
Let me ask you this. So you like it as a spectator. I'm just curious, as like someone that's at the very top of this, like you're on your way to being at the top of the sport. Like you're like a serious competitor. How do you like people talking about you on podcasts, or like talking about your performance, or talking about this, or picking you or not picking you? Like, how does that play psychologically for you? Is that weird to like hear your name and stuff like that?
Uh, no, I wouldn't say so. I think, I mean, yeah, I think, no, I wouldn't say it's weird or anything. Yeah, I think maybe one of the particularities with me is just that I raced a lot of races. Like I ran a lot of races which people don't really know about. Like I've done a lot about like the World Cup stuff, like WMRA, which in North America, maybe I think people don't really know that so much. It's more popular like in Europe. So maybe like sometimes I've been a bit like left out of conversations just because people just don't know the races that I've done, which is totally understandable. Um, but yeah, no, I don't find it, I mean, I don't take it personally or anything. It's just normal. And yeah, I think it's fun that, you know, people talk about that and just make previews of races and talk about the athletes. I think that's, if you want to make people more interested in like the competitive side of the sport, I think you kind of have to talk about like the athletes like individually and make these comparisons. And I think it's just gonna, at the end of the day, like elevate everyone and the athletes themselves, because they're gonna have more visibility, so therefore more opportunities with sponsors.
Dude, I think it's a beautiful answer. And I think it's a super positive mindset to have. I just get, the reason I ask is because like I'm an athlete in the sport and I cover the sport. So it's weird for me. I always am interested to get people's takes on it, because it's like, you know, if I'm sitting here and we're doing like a let's say Sunapee, right? Or Broken Arrow, we're having, you know, the race conversation about it. Like we talk about strengths and weaknesses. We talk about all these different things. So, and I think about how I would feel. I'm like, oh man, if someone, you know, I would feel great if, or elated if someone's like, oh, I'd pick this person or yourself to, you know, to be, I don't know, a top contender, if you will. And then like, or if someone, you know, talks some beef or whatever, like, I don't know. I just find it really interesting. It's like a new dynamic of our sport, for the commentary that's like really growing. And, yeah, I don't know. Just be prepared. There's going to be a lot of, we're going to have a lot of cool conversations going into this year with the Seep stuff. Like we're going to cover Sunapee in a way that like, I think a lot of these mountain running champs have never been covered before. Broken Arrow, definitely. So there's a lot of cool stuff we're going to be doing coming in this year. So it's good to get your feedback. Appreciate that.
Yeah, but I'm all for it, you know. I mean, maybe some people are gonna be like a bit, I don't want to say triggered or like insulted by it, but I mean, I think I'm all for it. You just have
No,
to not take it personally, and it's just opinions. And yeah, I think I mean, people just have to realize it's just opinions. And if you want to show that, well, you're better than what people expect, then you just have to do it.
well, it's a competitive sport, right? Like it's conflict
Yeah,
and conflict resolution, right? Like
yeah.
we have the conflict with the race, and and it's resolution by who wins, right? I don't know. I
Yeah,
think
and we're talking about running performances. Like
right,
we're
right,
not talking about like the people themselves, like their value as people. We're talking about their running performances. I think
right.
there's such a big distinction to make there that sometimes like people kind of like get like intertwined a bit. But it's like, yeah, to say that someone is going to beat someone at a race doesn't mean that that person is better than the other person. It just means that their running performance
Right.
we think is going to be better than someone else. Like, yeah,
Based off of prior performance, right? It's
yeah,
interesting. I think it's cool.
yeah.
On the back of like on that competition discussion, I'm very curious to hear like what your relationship is with competition. Like, how do you view it?
I think what I just said is actually something that I think has helped me quite a lot is to separate performance with value as a person. I think that's something that I've definitely leaned on a lot in the past couple years in the sense that I think I have a very healthy relationship with competition in the sense that when I approach races, I'm very I don't want to say hard towards myself, but I have very high goals and like high standards for myself. But I think since I'm able to differentiate like who I am as a person and my running performances, that means that if I don't meet my goals, I'm not like unhappy afterwards because it's just like, well, I didn't meet my goals, but I'm still me, it doesn't mean that I'm less of a person afterwards. Um, and I think that's something that's very important as a competitor, like who puts a lot of like high pressure like on ourselves in terms of like performance. Because if you don't make that distinction, I think it can be really hard after bad races to like cope with that. But yeah, I mean, I really love competition, and I think yeah, for me, one of my biggest motivations now in training is just to be able to compete, and I think that's part of why I do sub ultra races. Is just because like the feels most often time like you finish within like less than a minute from other runners, and you really have to give it your all. And during the race, like you're always, there's always someone in your sight in front of you or behind you. And I think that aspect of sub ultra running is something that I really, really enjoy.
Dude, it's the greatest sport on earth, man. I
Yeah.
have to say that. On that topic, like, do you find it easier with sub ultra? Because we do so many races in the season, right? I find it easier to like shake off a bad performance just because like, all right, well, I got another one the next weekend or the weekend after that, right? Like I feel like it's easy to forget.
100%. I feel bad for people who do ultras, and I have a lot of friends who do that. And sometimes it's kind of heartbreaking because they have like this 3 to 4 month training block for this one specific race. And we all know as runners that some days it's out of your control. Like some days you just wake up like on the wrong side of the bed and you just have like a bad day. And it's been very heartbreaking to see, like, for example, friends who have like these amazing training blocks, but on the day of the race, they just don't perform for X or Y reason. But after an ultra, you can't be like, if you want to race again, it's like, well, okay, I gotta try again in like 3 or 4 months because it takes so long to recover from these races. Whereas in sub ultra, which is like so nice, is if you have a bad race, then it's like, well, okay, I can
See you
just
next week.
exactly. And yeah, that's super fun. And it's not to say that sub ultra racing is easier, like not at all, but it's the recovery time from races which is much shorter than the ultra races. And yeah, I think that's amazing. I think in the last couple of years, I mean, like I just said, I really love competing. And since I do sub ultra races, I've been able to do so many races in the last couple of years. I think 2024 and 2023, I think I ran 19 and 20 races, like
Wow.
respectively for those 2 years. So yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I think it's amazing too, because I mean, it's an opportunity to build your career, right? With all of those races, people you get your name out there, and you can kind of see like, okay, where do I fall amongst the competition? So it actually helps with training too. I don't know. I just find that there's so many good opportunities to answer questions and check boxes with with racing more and having those, because that's the other thing too. I was talking to somebody the other day about like race rust and like how it's like a real thing where like you will forget certain things. So you have to do tune-up races and tune-up efforts to be able to, before your big dance, your proverbial big dance, to get ready for something like that,
That's so true. Actually, in 2023, I did 2 trips to Europe, where in each of the trips I raced like 5 weeks in a row. And both of those trips, my first races of these 2 trips were like my worst races. But I think it was because like it had been like so long since I had like that race effort and that sort of like you kind of like have to be in a special mindset when you're racing and you forget about it very quickly. So I think those first races went pretty bad. But since I had that experience, I was able to bounce back and race really well, like for the next weeks after that. But yeah, for someone who's doing ultras, like that first race, if it went bad, then it's like, damn, start again in a couple months. So yeah, I think there's definitely an advantage of that, of just like practicing being in that competition setting.
Yeah. The competition setting, and then even like what to eat for breakfast, right? Or like how many hours should I eat before like all these little things that like, you might be able to get away with on like a training run, but like when it comes to like a impossibly hard race effort and like you're smashing yourself, like those little things add up. I have a question for you about ultra versus sub ultra, especially being a sub ultra athlete and then racing in Europe. You see how big the sport is in Europe. It's enormous. But the US remains very ultra centric. And I have literally was just talking to my wife about this the other day. I don't know why. Like, I don't know what it is that's so like, I don't know. Like, I find sub ultra, for me, it's so captivating. For so many others it is, and it's so interesting. But I still do not know. And I'm curious to see like what others think. Like, I pose this question out to everybody.
Yeah, that's something I think about quite a lot. And I think there's a lot of different reasons. I think in the media side of it, I think it's pretty simple in the sense that if people see an article where it's like, Chris ran 300 miles in 57 hours, like anyone who reads that is like, whoa. Even if you don't run yourself, it's like, damn, like 57 hours, like running, that's crazy. That's insane. So people are going to like click on that article and will want to read more. Whereas if you say like, oh, like Patrick Kipengeno won the VK in 33 minutes, it's like, okay, I guess that's fast, but I don't really know. So I think people are maybe less interested in that. But then I think as like a participation standpoint, I think it's just that most of the runners run because how can I say this? I think what they search in trail running isn't the performance side of it. It's more about like just being out there for a lot of hours in nature and just like having a good time. And I think for a lot of these people, it's like their challenge is more, like doing longer distances instead of like, okay, like I'll really push myself like for a vertical race. I think for them, the accomplishment is to finish races. And so for the majority of like trail running participants, completing a VK isn't like a big enough challenge just because they know they can do it. Like most people can complete a VK if you want.
Yeah.
But for them, like being able to, like arrive at a finish line of a 50-mile is for them like a much bigger accomplishment just because it's something that they're not sure at the start line that they're going to be able to do. Whereas I think like for us, our motivation in sub ultra running is not to finish, but it's to do it as fast as we can and push ourselves as much as we can. And I think there's less people that find that appealing. Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's a really good answer. And I think it checks so many things. Well, and then on the flip side of that, though, and I agree 100% with what you're saying. Like, for instance, like Broken Arrow, right? The VK. I mean, they must have, it's got to be what, 500 or 600 participants in like a VK? It might be a little less than that. But what I'm trying to get at is like the VK at the Broken Arrow and the Rut gets like an enormous amount of people. So like people that are interested in it. The interesting thing is like if we had more of those in America or even just in North America in general, like would it be possible to continue to grow the sport? Because you see Europe, right? And like people know who the elites are, like everybody does. And it's like this fan base. It's just like cycling, right? Or just like tennis or whatever. Like people know who the professionals are and they follow the sport in that way. And they also are participants in it. Whereas like in America, it's like, I think it's a little bit less that people care about what the elites are and more so because it's such a mass participation event, they can go participate in it. So they just want to do it. But I feel like if we continue to grow the people in it, or the fan base, if you will, by highlighting the elites and highlighting the people doing it, I think that will continue to grow the sport and push it in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking out loud now, but I think one of the reasons why maybe a lot of like road runners, like a lot of like mass participants are doing road races is because like the distances are standardized.
Standardized. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Well, like runners can have like very clear objectives, like, okay, I want to run a half marathon like under 2 hours. Whereas in trail running, I think if we want to make it maybe more appealing for these types of people, like the courses have to stay like the exact same. So for example, the Broken Arrow, there has to be like people have to be there and be like, okay, like from what I can tell, like 1 hour and a half is like a pretty good goal. So like I'll try to go under 1 hour and a half or something like that. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, I think it's good
That's
because
what I
it's
would think.
in the way it's marketed. Like I think that in
Yeah.
the standardized distance too. One of the things I like get frustrated with sometimes is like we have, we have the ascent, we have the vertical, we have the up down. And I feel like the up down is not something that's talked about really, like because it's more so, oh, we'll just do the 11K or do the 27K when like an up down is a much easier way to convey that, convey it. So and market it, if you will, like, well, this is an 11 or 10K distance and they can kind of figure it out that way. So I wonder if that's a component as well. I don't know. There's a lot of like things you can toy with to say like, all right, well, how do we get more? Because the sport is growing enormously. It's so crazy how many people, and obviously brands are making more money than they ever have, which is, that's great because that trickles down to the athletes. I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see as things progress if we can grow sub ultra over the next few years.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
yeah. Dude, really quick, I do want to pivot a little bit back to the Golden Trail series, because obviously you ran Mammoth and you ran Headlands this year. I do have a question for you about Headlands. It was, for folks that don't know this, it was separated. Like the men's field went on Sunday and the women's field ran on Saturday. What did you think about running in an all men's field? Like, how did that, like, what was the dynamic like for that? Like, do you think, I don't know, like, this is very different. Like, I think women should have, like, in some cases for these like high octane races, should have their own fields. Like, what were your thoughts on that?
I actually think he was great. I think Golden Trail are pretty good with that in the sense that I think that was one of the first time where they're like literally separated from a day, like the women's field from the men's field. But I think even like at other races, sometimes they, for example, made the women start like 30 minutes before the men. And I think that's a really good initiative because if we start all together, then 99% of the time what happens is that the coverage is on the men. And then when the men are finishing, like when the first men are finishing, that's where like the exciting part of the women's race is actually going on, but we just don't see it because the cameras are focused like on the top 10 men finishing. So yeah, I think it was great. Like as a runner myself, it doesn't really change much in the sense that yeah, I mean it doesn't really I guess it's more like for the woman that it must change a bit more in the sense that a lot of like the elite women, for example, in races where everyone starts together, like they have to run with a lot of like the like competitive men and they're surrounded by a bunch of people. So maybe for them, like it's a bit more complicated to know like what position they are and they have to pass a lot more people, which from what I heard can be quite annoying for a lot of the women. And I would not want to be in their place for that. So yeah, I think it's actually really great that Helens did that. And I think, yeah, even at Mammoth Trail Fest, I think, yeah, the women had like a 30-minute head start or even more than that, because I think the first women finished before the first men. And yeah, I think in terms of coverage, it's a very good initiative from Golden Trail, and yeah, just to make the sport more, like from a spectator standpoint, more fair, like as much coverage for men and women. I think it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just thought it was really interesting that they did it, and I don't know. I've only heard just positive reviews about it, dude. What did you think of Headlands in the sense like that was like probably the fastest Golden Trail race that like they may have ever had? Like that was a speedy race, dude. Like what did you take away from that? Were you just like was that like especially as a mountain athlete who excels more going uphill, if you will? Like was that hard for you? Like what'd you think?
I loved the uphills, but I got so destroyed on the downhills. Like the downhills weren't technical, but there were like enough switchbacks and like routes where you kind of like, at least for me, like I was kind of slowed down a bit. And I mean, looking at the splits of like Eluzine or like Philemon on that last descent, it's insane. Like I think they ran like a, is it like a sub 14-minute 5K or somewhere
Something
around
like
like a
that.
14-minute 5K? But like that downhill wasn't like there, like yes, it was like kind of smooth, but you had so many switchbacks where I mean I felt like at every switchback I was kind of like forced to drop down to like 7 minute per mile pace. So it's crazy for me like how fast they ran on the downhills. Um yeah, for me that race was particularly frustrating a bit just because basically the course was three up downs. So yeah, three climbs, three downhills. And on every climb, I would catch a bunch of runners. But then on the downhills, those runners would then pass me back. And then I'd catch them again on the downhill. So it was like a lot of back and forth like that. I felt like every time I was, yeah, just gaining momentum and moving up into the field, I would just lose that instantly as soon as the downhill started. But yeah, I think it was a really cool course. I find it kind of unfortunate that it doesn't seem to be part of the Golden Trail this year, and I don't even know if the race is going to continue to exist.
I have no
Hopefully
idea.
so, but um, yeah, that was really fast, and it was just so exciting. And looking at the splits afterwards was really impressive, especially given the fact that I think the course was not as fast as people think because there were like quite a lot of like switchbacky sections where that definitely like slowed you down quite a bit.
Interesting. Yeah, dude, it's crazy to hear that like it was not because on paper it looked like smoking fast.
Yeah.
Looked like, you know, but that's interesting to hear like how wild it was. What did you prefer, Headlands or Mammoth?
Oof. In terms of course,
Of course.
uh, I mean, I actually say Mammoth. I think Mammoth was less technical than Headlands.
Interesting.
I think both races weren't like super technical, but I'd say Mammoth was a bit less. Like that last 14 kilometers of downhill at Mammoth was pretty rolling. And I think given that it was at altitude, I think it was more advantageous for me just because at altitude everyone is running slower. So how can I say this? I feel like sometimes when we're doing downhills, I just don't have like that turnover to go super fast. But since everyone is going slower, that turnover is maybe a bit less important in a way. So I think it was more advantageous for me at Mammoth. And also at Mammoth, you have like this huge climb, which is like the Dragon's Back ascent, which is like yeah, like a 3 mile climb. And for me, like those sort of climbs is right in my alley. And I was able to make some pretty big moves there. And I think that really was good for me. And yeah, I really appreciate it. I really like that course.
Interesting. Cool. No, I'm stoked to hear that you want to that you enjoyed it. And um I want to pivot a little bit to um the Canadian mountain running champs that you race, what was it, the vertical and the up down, had two amazing races. But my curiosity out of that is that are you planning on going to Worlds in September?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm for sure selected for the up down because I finished first Canadian behind Dan Kurtz, who finished first overall for the race. For the vertical, I'm not technically like officially selected yet because I finished second behind Alex
Alex.
Ricard,
Yeah.
who got like the Canadian. It was like basically the first Canadian had the automatic spot. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get selected for the vertical as well. But yeah, I'm really excited for that. It's going to be my third year at the World Mountain Running Champs, and I think Canada this year is going to have like a very good team. I feel like every year or every 2 years, I guess, the interest among like Canadians to be part of the team has just grown a lot more. And I think especially like this year at the Canadian Championships, it was very remarkable to see how many runners from the West made the trip to come race here in Quebec. Because I think historically, a lot of the Canadian mountain running championships, if the race took place in West, like in British Columbia, would be only people from that area who would race. Because I think, yeah, Canada is like so big. Like for me to go to British Columbia, it's like a 6 hour flight. Um, so yeah, most of the time, if the race would take place in the West, it would be only Western Canadian people who would do the race, and in the East, it would be the other way around. And I think this year was really exciting to see so many people from very like pretty much almost all provinces of Quebec make the trip to come race the Canadian running championships. And I think we're going to have great teams. Even like on the women's side, we have Jade Belsberg, who's an amazing runner. She finished second at Broken Arrow this year. I think that's going to be very exciting. And Elisa Morin, who's another runner from Quebec, who won both the vertical and the up down. And yeah, I think it's going to be. I can't wait for that race in September.
Yeah, you guys are going to bring a stacked team, man. Especially like, you know, I was astonished back in watching Sunapee, and you saw Alex's finish on that video that you have on YouTube. Like, it's weird because like, not only do we like, I kind of view Joe as like one of, if not the greatest of all time, but like, not too many people get to beat him. And like seeing Alex do it, I was like, whoa. Like Alex Rickard got, I mean, sorry, I mispronounced his last name, but like,
oh, that's right.
He's a beast, dude. Like I was thoroughly impressed. I know he's out in Squamish, and I had a couple, Jesse McCauley and a few others, had recommended him come on the podcast. We're trying to get him on now. So if he hears this, we got to recruit him.
Yeah. Alex is a beast. Like our nickname for him is l'animal, the animal. He's so good, man. And like in these vertical races, because I raced a lot with him in Europe in 2023, especially. And his times have been like really insane. Like we raced the Mont Blanc VK, vertical kilometer at Mont Blanc, which like Killian has raced that, Remy Bonnet has raced that, and his time is like really up there. I think like the course has always like changed like a bit from one year to another, but you can check like the Strava segments for like the bigger portion of it, which like has stayed the same. And I think he has like the second fastest time or something like that.
Wow.
Up that course. And yeah, I think like a steep vertical race where it's like, let's say like that 20 to 25% grade with like steps in the course, I think Alex is like top 5 in the world for sure.
Oh, dude, we got to get him out to do the Manitou incline. I want to see somebody break Remy Bonnet's record on that finally.
Yeah. I think he would be really good at that sort of stuff. Like or that, or like La Fouille in Switzerland.
Yes, I was just going to bring that up.
People get like the vertical kilometer like world records.
Yeah,
I think he would be amazing for that sort of course.
Have you ever run on the La Fouille course?
I was there with Alex, but we were there like a couple days after another race that we did in Switzerland, and it was very tempting to like try an all-out effort, but we didn't. But we checked it out, and yeah, it looks amazing. It's just so cool to see. Like, I guess it must be kind of similar to the Manitou incline, where you just see the steps like going up, 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 up.
Yep.
And you can see like so far up the course, and yeah, it would be really cool to go back there one day and like actually try like a full-on effort.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be that far. Is it that far from Zinal? I don't know.
No, that's it. It's really close.
Is it really? Oh, dude.
Yeah. I think like the next day we were in Zermatt, which is relatively close to all that Sierra Zinal. Yeah.
Oh man, dude, you might have to throw that on the list this year.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a really cool area. Yeah.
Yeah, that was super cool. All right, so we hit selections. We talked about the we talked about worlds. I'm trying to think if we didn't hit anything I wanted to get to. I'm curious to see who inspires you.
That's a good question. I get inspired a lot about like track runners. I think a lot of the runners I follow are runners on the track and road. I listen a lot to the Coffee Club podcast.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
I've heard
know
good
if
things.
you know those guys. It's like a group of like track runners who train in Boulder, Colorado, from like the OAC on Athletics Club. And I mean, I guess I'm inspired by them in the sense that I really like their attitude, where it's like they're very professional, like they train at a super high level, but at the same time, like they have this very laid back approach to the sport and they really have fun with it. And that's something which I kind of find it really cool in the sense that you can, on one hand, be really intense with like all the training and want to do all the little things correctly. But at the same time, you can still really enjoy it. And I think like sometimes people think that they have to make a choice between the two. But I think their sort of mindset is, yeah, is one with that I find really, really cool. And I guess that's what I aspire to be for sure.
I like that, man. Dude, what are your thoughts on like so now like you're with Brooks, I feel like you would have the ability to live and train in a lot of different places. Like if you do you see yourself staying like where you're at for a long time, or do you think you would ever relocate to like find like a different training hub or somewhere that would fit you better?
And that's a really great question. I think this winter, especially with the winter that we've had, I've definitely thought about it a lot more than in the past. And it's very difficult for me to say just because for sure, like if the question is like if it would be more beneficial for like a pure running standpoint to go stay somewhere else, like 100%. Like in Quebec, we don't have altitude, we don't have like the high mountains, we don't have. I mean, we have our winters, and even in the summer, like it's very very humid, which is kind of makes it a bit more harder to train. But at the same time, like this is where my family is, this is where most of my friends are, so it would be kind of, I mean, I'm not sure. I think one thing that has to be taken into consideration is just like your happiness. Like it's not worth it to stay somewhere else, even if you know that you're gonna maybe become a better runner staying somewhere else if you're gonna be less happy staying at that other place. But what I am considering is maybe like, for example, for next winter, for like these months from let's say January to March, do like a training camp somewhere.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I think our winters are particularly really hard to train through.
No, I think it's a great answer, man. And one of the reasons I was tempted to ask too is just because I've seen so much investment from Brooks kind of go the way into sub ultra. So a part of me was like, all right, they're clearly building like a sub ultra team. Like I had to wonder if maybe like there's any idea of it being like co-located at any point in time.
Oh my God, I would love that. If
Well,
that would be the case, like hands down, like I'm moving out like tomorrow. That's always been that's always been a dream of mine. Like particularly like looking at like the coffee club guys or like Hanson's Brooks or just like Brooks Beasts or teams like that. I think that's something that would be so awesome in trail running. I don't think we're there yet in our sport, but
it's coming.
I'm all for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're maybe 5 years away, something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
less, maybe more. But yeah, I think we'll. I mean, the weird thing about I don't know. Like I think the Boulder boys have shown it can work because they all like none of them do sub ultra, if you will. Like they all are ultra runners. They all run similar or race similar distances, so it kind of makes sense. But like for sub ultra too, I think like if you just had like I don't know, like you, Dan, Miki, like a handful of guys and gals that could train at a high level, like I don't know. I think that could work, dude. Like just speaking that into existence. There you go.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. And yeah, it helps so much. Like even though they're not really sub ultra runners, like I train with a group of friends that do mainly like ultra runners and that do mostly like ultra running. And even though like our workouts are a bit different, just like to be able to do like our long runs together or like our workouts at different paces or whatever, like it helps so much to be there with like other people. And yeah, I can't imagine having people who are there who are doing the exact same thing as you. That must be like even more beneficial.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would definitely move everyone forward. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool idea. Not to pivot too hard. I'm so curious because like your specialty is like uphill running. Do you think we could ever get you out here to come do the Pikes Peak Ascent?
100%. I was looking at it this year, but unfortunately this year I think it's at the same time as
As
World
Worlds.
Champs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely one of the races like on my list. I think those types of races with a lot of history, like I said earlier in the podcast, like are races which I'm really appealed towards. And, where the course is very simple. It's like you start at the bottom, you finish at the top. Yeah, that's just a concept that is very appealing to me. And yeah, I definitely want to come there one day, even though like the altitude is most likely going to be a pretty big obstacle for me, but I'm all for it. And yeah, it's definitely one on my bucket list.
Oh, dude, I'd love to hear it. On the topic of altitude, because like I was just so astonished. Like you did really well at Broken Arrow in both races last year. How did you come out early? Like, or were you just like genetically like really good at like dealing with suffering at altitude?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate to have a friend that has an altitude tent.
Ah,
So I
that
was
makes
able
sense.
to rent it from him for a couple weeks. Um, it's very difficult to say like that it has definitely helped me because I definitely felt at Broken Arrow that I was running like slower than normal, even like on my training runs. But at the same time, like even if you are perfectly acclimatized, you're still running slower. So it's
Yeah.
very difficult to like quantify like how much it actually helped. But at the very minimum, like it must have not like hindered me at all. And yeah, when I look back on it, it's like even Mammoth, I mean, Mammoth was even higher than Broken Arrow. And those were like probably some of my best races of the year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it must have helped at least a bit, even though I felt like I was going much slower. But yeah, I think that's how I prepared. Yeah.
That's interesting. Good to know. Yeah, I was so curious. I was like, man, you smashed it. And I was like, coming from basically like what, 1,000 feet or something like that, or a couple thousand feet. If
Oh yeah, I'm at sea level pretty
sea
much.
level.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, wow,
Yeah.
that's impressive, man.
Yeah.
All right, dude. As we wind down, I'm curious to hear like what your walkout song is. Like you're getting ready for a race. If you have earphones on, if you're a music guy, what are you listening to?
Okay, I'm pretty scientific about this. So it depends on my HRV. So
Interesting.
HRV is your heart rate variability. And basically when you wake up, you can check it out. And if it's like on most smart watches, you can check it out. And if your HRV is low, basically it means that your body is kind of like under stress a bit. You're a bit more like stressed than normal. And if your HRV is super high, it means like you're kind of relaxed. So if I see that I'm relaxed, maybe too relaxed, then, well, first of all, I'm going to take a bit more caffeine than normal. Plus, I'm going to put like some more like hype songs. So maybe like some Tupac or like some Eminem or stuff like
Oh,
that.
hell yeah.
But if my HRV is pretty low, which means I'm kind of like more nervous than usual, then I might just like chill out a bit, take less caffeine, and listen to like some country music and like some Johnny Cash or
Oh,
something
dude,
like
Johnny Cash.
that.
I like it. I like it. Do you get nerves before races, like standing on those big start lines? Do you get nervous at all?
Of course, I get worried if I'm not nervous for races. I think it's yeah, pretty much every time I'm pretty nervous for it. And Um, yeah, I think I get nervous just because I know how much it's going to hurt. And I'm also always worried about how my mind is going to react to that hurt.
Yeah.
Because I've had
Yes.
a lot of
Yes.
races, like all the races I've done, like those vertical races that last like 30 to 40 minutes, after like 10 minutes in the race, you're not feeling good. But it's more like, how am I going to react mentally to not feeling good? That's going to kind of decide if you have a good race or not. Um, so yeah, I think it's sort of like that apprehension of what's to come and how I'm going to react to that. That makes me the most nervous, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think it's natural being nervous. I've long thought I ponder this all the time because I get nervous at start lines. I'm like, I guess it's natural. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
It's a
it
weird
shows that
feeling.
you care, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a good sign. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird feeling. All right, dude. Last question. I'm so curious to hear this because I usually ask people like a grouping of, do you believe in Bigfoot? Do you believe in aliens, AI? I'm so curious to hear if you believe in Bigfoot.
if I believe in Bigfoot, what the in Canada, that's not really a thing, I'd say.
What?
I'm gonna say no.
Oh man. All right.
Hard
Fair.
no.
That's a hard no. That was a big shoot down. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Remy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is an amazing conversation, dude. I think we covered a ton. I want to wish you the absolute best of luck in 2025. We'll be in touch. I'll see you at Sunapee, and we'll be doing some pre and post race interviews at Sunapee, definitely with you. So looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Man. Yeah.
Man, can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Yeah. It's a great conversation. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
What'd you guys think? Oh man, such a fun episode. Thanks so much to Remy for coming on, and absolute congratulations for that third place at Big Alta. Can't wait to see what Remy's going to do this season. I'm sure he's going to spank some folks at some of these races. The dude is dynamite. All right, before we get going, hop on Instagram. Let's get Remy some followers. You can find him at Remy, so it's REMI _Leroux, LEROUX _. You can also just type in probably Leroux, LEROUX, and it'll come up on Instagram, and give him a follow. I'm sure he would appreciate that. Send him some emails. Or send him some messages of some kind words congratulating him on his finish, as well as what you guys thought of the episode. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Cool. Guys, I've got some big news this week. So this upcoming Saturday, the 29th at 8 o'clock in the morning, Colorado Running Company. I know I sound like a broken record, but if you are on the Front Range and are interested in joining us for our 1 year anniversary, we're going to be doing a group run. It's going to have 2 distances, one 4 mile and one 6 to 7 mile-ish distance, and those are going to start out the door probably around 8:05 to 8:10 in the morning. First 20 people through the door are going to get a free pair of Cetus socks that I'm super excited to give away. Cetus USA was super kind to provide us with some discount codes and some free socks to be able to give away to those folks that show up. In addition, after that group run, we are going to be doing some refreshments provided by Ultimate Direction, as well as Colorado Running Company, and some conversation. We're going to have Mutt-Ruck out there. Mutt-Ruck's going to be talking about some of their products. Our friends from Tava Tours, plus the Tava Lodge out in Colorado Springs, are going to be out there talking about some of the projects they're working on and their vision for what they have for their business. That's going to be followed by some product demos and discussion around those from Ultimate Direction, who's going to be giving away a bunch of free gear. Most of this situation and most of this day is brought to you by Ultimate Direction. They're going to be giving away a ton of stuff, and they're going to be demoing the new Race and Ultra Vest, the Race 6 liter and Ultra 12 liter that just dropped that most people have not seen yet. So I'm excited for the folks that show up to get to see those products. Because they're super cool. We're also going to be doing trail shoe demos. Nike is going to be there with 2. Nike Trail is going to be there with 2 shoes. I think it's the Wild Horse and maybe a new version of the Kiger. I can't specifically remember. I was told this information. I should have remembered. But yeah, just expect to be able to try on 2 different new pairs of Nike trail shoe, and I think you'll be able to take those with you on your group run, I believe. All that followed up and capped off with an amazing podcast with Bailey Kowalczyk, who's going to be our guest of honor. She is going to be on the pod for a live podcast in front of the audience at the Colorado Running Company. So we're so excited. I think it's going to be a really fun, action-packed day. Hope you guys can make it. Would love to see you all there. Cool. All right. Very, very, very last and very, very not least. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. If you really, really enjoyed it, please leave us a rating and write why on Apple, because that helps our discoverability on Apple on their platform, and that would be amazing. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the long ramble, and I hope to see you guys all on Saturday.